Next, we have Dr. Federico Tosi, a staff research scientist at Italy's National Institute for Astrophysics, and he will be speaking about MELODY, the Moon multisensor and laboratory data analysis.
Hello, everyone. Today I will show you a summary of the research project MELODY, which was selected in November 2020 as part of a national call for projects of significant national interest issued by Italy's National Institute for Astrophysics, INAF, and was funded with a total amount of 167 kilo euros. In addition to the INAF Institute, this project also involves some Italian universities, namely the University of Roma 3, one of the three public universities in Rome, the University of Padua, University of Florence, and University of Trieste. Next slide, please. In this slide, we see some of the global maps available for our moon. In the upper left panel, for example, we have a geochemical map. Those maps reveal the abundance of some elements within the first meter of surface thickness. For example, iron, titanium, hydrogen, and thorium. Then we have maps of mineralogy in the upper right, which reveal the nature and distribution of minerals, including hydroxylated and hydrated minerals. And finally, in the bottom panels, we see maps of topography and gravimetry, essential for providing a 3D view of our satellite. So the first question that comes to our mind that we might ask ourselves is, are these maps totally independent of each other, or is there some degree of correlation, especially in some when selected places? Next slide, please. The exploration of the lunar subsoil was carried out by means of radar techniques aboard several missions, starting from Apollo 17. The most complete data set regarding radar sounding has been returned by the LRS instrument aboard the Japanese mission Kaguya Selene, which operated at a frequency of 5 MHz. These that you can see here are famous examples of Selene LRS radargrams, some of which show one or two distinct subsurface interfaces. And these interfaces are estimated to be a depth of hundreds of meters. These three examples, by the way, are representative of most of the profiles measured in the lunar mare. So another question we may ask ourselves is, what could we find out if we reanalyzed this data considering the latest data analysis techniques? Next slide, please. Unlike the lunar rocks returned by the astronauts, the lunar meteorites can come from virtually anywhere on the lunar surface, including the far side. Hence, laboratory analysis in principle could place these meteorite specimens in the global geochemical and petrological context of our natural satellite. Coupling mineralogical and geochemical and petrographic data with the spectroscopic analysis on a few selected lunar meteorite specimens, which will be acquired on purpose for this project, is representative of different lithologic characteristics occurring on the lunar surface. Next slide, please. So there is a number of key open questions. We don't claim with this MELODY project to answer all of them, but for example, some of the key questions are, is there any connection among composition, subsurface structure, and mass distribution on the South Polar Aitken basin, the so-called SPA, and how this might affect the distribution of in situ research utilization? Is there any relationship between composition, thickness of subsurface layers, and surface agents on different maria? Are there any other hidden lava tubes on lunar maria? Is there any relationship with layer thickness, pit dimensions, ages, and compositions? Next slide, please. This diagram shows how the work within the MELODY project is organized. There are three work packages. One is dedicated to surface science, one to subsurface geophysics, and one to the analysis of lunar meteorites. At the beginning, each of these three work packages works independently from the others to obtain products which, however, can ultimately be merged to provide direct connections between geological and geophysical units, ultimately aimed at obtaining the implications for the distribution of ISRUs. Next slide, please. As for work package one, namely the one focused on surface science, one of the objectives is to understand if and to what extent the information we globally have for the surface of the moon is connected to each other. In other words, are there correlations between mineralogy, geochemistry, topography, and gravimetry, at least in some well-selected areas? Next slide, please. Obviously, for reasons of time and manpower, this work cannot cover the entire surface of the moon, but must focus only on a few regions of interest. We have chosen three. Our first region of interest is Mare Ingeni and Thomson Crater, because compared to the South Polar Aitken Basin, Mare Ingeni on the far side has been less thoroughly studied. Mare Ingeni has peculiar geologic structure, most notably weirs, and the inner Thomson Crater also hosts a well-known pit. The entire region lends itself to a combination of geological, mineralogical, and geochemical analysis. Therefore, we will go for a data fusion and subsequent classification. The second region of interest are some craters within the southern Aitken Polar Basin. On the far side, some craters within Aitken have been the subject of a very detailed mapping, particularly Apollo and von Karman. So a possible extension of this ongoing work could be adding complementary information, for example, geochemistry and gravity, to the mineralogical mapping, and classifying the aggregated data set. The third kind of region of interest are potential landing sites for future human missions. So we know that future human missions plan to land on the moon in the southern polar region and in the near side hemisphere due to the need to maintain a constant radio link with the Earth. At latitudes useful for finding materials relevant to ISRU, such as hydrated minerals or volatile compounds present at a shallow depth, some craters are quite large and have a slightly bumpy topography that makes them favorable places for human landing purposes. Next slide, please. As for work package number 2, namely subsurface geophysics, compared to previous radar data analysis, particularly Selene LRS data, a surface scattering simulation could help us to confirm or disprove that some interfaces observed in the subsurface could be due to natural cavities, as already suggested, in at least one case, namely the paper by Kaku et al. 2017. So correlation among radargrams may make it possible to investigate the lateral continuity and thickness variations of the geologic bodies comprised between the identified interfaces. Furthermore, other interfaces may provide information on the structure of the subsurface, but to do this properly, however, we will also obtain lunar regolith simulants and study their dielectric properties. For this purpose, we will use the climatic chamber of the physics department of the Roma Tre University, where the dielectric and magnetic properties of lunar simulants can be measured at temperatures representative of real planetary conditions and in a broad range of frequencies. Next slide, please. As far as work package 3 is concerned, this WP focuses on measurements to be carried out on a few samples of lunar meteorites to be purchased on the market. We can count on a series of laboratory facilities. Those available at the IAPS Institute in Rome, which is part of INAF, will be used to obtain a bidirectional reflectance spectra in the visible to near infrared range, using a goniometer combined with a field spec probe. It will eventually be possible to obtain spectra also at longer wavelength from the near to the mid-infrared thanks to additional instrumentation. Next slide, please. In addition to mineralogical measurements, geochemical analysis will also be carried out on the same meteorite samples thanks to the laboratories of the Department of Earth Sciences of the University of Florence, which will provide an unprecedented characterization of the isotopic signatures of those meteorites. Of particular interest for this project is the presence of nucleosynthetic anomalies of chromium-54 due to inhomogeneities of the solar nebula. The presence of such anomalies on the selected lunar meteorites could reveal remnants of the impact body on the analyzed specimen and possibly its nature. Next slide, please. And in this final slide, I leave you with a bullet list that just summarizes what I explained in the previous slide. So the overarching goal is to gather a broader understanding of our moon by combining surface and subsurface data analysis on a few regions of interest, adding also an unprecedented, new in some sense, laboratory characterization of the lunar environment. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Tosi.